Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again. You know, I'm kind of a weirdo. Don't everybody rush to dispute that at once or anything, but what I mean is I'm kind of a weirdo when it comes to traditional nerd behavior. There are many things that people who are massive nerds like myself, people who read comic books, who eagerly embrace genre fare like sci-fi and fantasy, who are kinda dorks about geeky and obscure stuff, tend to do. One of those is the age-old, who would win in a fight between such and such? I don't really do that. I am not interested in thinking about whether Goku could defeat the Hulk or something. It is not something that I ponder. I'll certainly memorize and think about the minutiae of a franchise. I know more about Star Trek than most people probably should, but I'm more willing to just shrug and say, yeah, it's just a dumb continuity error when it comes to a weird contradiction with lore, and focus more on whether the dramatic elements were successful or not. Continuity contradictions are just a rotten cherry on top of a garbage sundae if said dramatic elements suck. And thus we get to another nerd tradition that I stand in the minority on. Oh boy, have you heard that they're going to adapt famous story into a movie or animated feature? Yeah, I heard. And I don't care. See, there's always this undercurrent to that when people expect me to be hyped and excited when it comes to, say, a Teen Titans or Batman story I like getting adapted into an animated film. That animation or live action are in some way superior mediums to comic books, and thus a great story in comics is finally getting adapted into said superior medium. And of course, no, they are not. Comics aren't better than movies, movies aren't better than comics. They are just different mediums. And I really don't need to see them in a straight-to-video package or heavily altered to be put into a live-action film. Adaptations are most certainly good and sometimes create a deeper appreciation for the source material, and sometimes the story is better told in one medium versus the original, but that doesn't speak to the quality of the medium itself or that the adaptation into a different medium needs to be something to be hyped for. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I got into the books because of the movies, but they have different strengths and different intentions, and both can be good to the point where I don't need to say, oh boy, the Silmarillion is finally getting adapted, or something like that. I am content with what I have with my comics. If they were to announce that the Technis Imperative, my favorite comic of all time, was being adapted, well, I'd be kind of confused for a second, but I wouldn't be chomping at the bit to see it. It's just not what I care about. And that really separates me from a lot of nerd culture. I'm not like your other nerd boys, where people get hyped and excited for adaptations of popular comic storylines. And indeed, there was a lot of hype for there to be an animated adaptation of Batman the Killing Joke, one of the most famous and infamous stories ever produced for The Dark Knight. Much like The Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke has gotten a lot of reevaluation over the years, with the big issue revolving around Barbara Gordon and the fact that the story was made canon to the DC universe. It is one of the most quintessential examples of women in refrigerators, massive life-changing trauma inflicted on Barbara Gordon, losing the use of her legs and now being a wheelchair user, and the story is not about her in any way. It's about Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and the Joker. Particularly the Joker. The story does not address Barbara's trauma or change in lifestyle in any way. She is shot by the Joker, stripped, explicit photos taken of her, a form of violation in itself, and then she is forgotten from the story so we can focus on three dudes. Let's be clear here, the stuff about those three dudes is well written. The story got famous for a reason, and the quality of art and writing delivered are top-notch. But in order to get there, they had to indulge in some bad, kinda skeevy tropes, and the excellent stuff afterwards with Barbara becoming Oracle does not excuse the crappy stuff that happened to get there. A good story can still have pretty big flaws, and The Killing Joke has them, to the point that its writer, famed wizard and perpetually angry at superheroes and the people who like them, Alan Moore, disowned the story. He hates it, partially because of his continual grudge against DC for screwing him over so much, but also because, according to him, The Killing Joke is a story about Batman and the Joker. It isn't about anything that you're ever going to encounter in real life, because Batman and the Joker are not like any human beings that have ever lived. So there's no important human information being imparted. You know, like all those other works of his that are all about real people and real human things, like the literary characters in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or Cthulhu mythos stuff in Neonomicon, or science hero Tom Strong. I kid, Alan Moore. I get wanting to disassociate yourself with work you did but don't like anymore. Really would be interesting to see a world where DC didn't screw him over, and whether that would change his attitude about his work, the superhero genre, and the medium as a whole. But let's get back to what we're here to talk about, the animated movie. The story is already relatively short, so the advantage of an animated adaptation in this case is that it can be expanded to finally fix the problems of The Killing Joke. Add on more story and agency for Barbara. I don't know if you guys had heard, but that didn't end up happening! So let's dig into the animated adaptation of The Killing Joke and see what they did do to try to fix the story.
Atop the fourth wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? What's all this art so rubbish? To anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he is a man, punch, sporadically a grouch. Linkara, he has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch. Linkara. A universe in flux, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara.
Some of you are probably wondering why I haven't talked about the original Killing Joke comic in the introduction. Well, that's because it's gonna be a bit before we actually get to the adaptation. Plus, this is supposed to be a review of the movie, not the comic source material. Oh sure, I'll talk about the relevant bits in relation to that, but this is about the animated work first and foremost.
First of all, I realize this is probably not how you thought the story would start.
But the comic was only like 48 pages originally, so we needed to pad this out so that the movie wouldn't be only 20 minutes long. Yeah, like the first half of this movie version is entirely new material, written by Brian Azzarello.
There was a time when capes and cowls and fighting crime really was exciting.
But then really dark stories where people died or were horribly mutilated or just underwent terrible traumas happened, and they haven't really gotten out of that mindset yet. Good thing this isn't one of those stories! Batgirl's been working with Batman for 3 years now, and she spots her father handing off something to Batman one night, explaining that she stays away from these conversations to reduce the risk of being found out by the commissioner.
You there?
Yeah.
Yeah?
We've got a robbery.
Your father really needs to stop handing me big file folders for robberies. It's really kind of hard to read them while also swinging through the city. And I just end up punching them all the same way anyway.
The robbers, in a semi-truck, manage to knock the cops out of the way as the Batmobile arrives to continue the chase, Barbara going on top of the truck and blowing open the hatch to pull out an armored car that the robbers had taken. With it gone, the ones in the truck cab abandon the trailer and manage to knock Batgirl off to the side, as Barbara is apparently taken aback by this smug dude just making a kissy face at her. She heads over to the goons in the trailer, one of whom pulls out a gun on her. She says he should surrender, and the Batmobile hits him from the side.
Batgirl, I've realized now that I need to be less violent in my methods of stopping criminals. It's only gonna lead to someone getting killed. This never happened, bye!
As Batman interrogates the person whose body is probably very broken right now, the goons that got away meet up with their boss, who happens to be the lead robber's uncle. He's naturally pissed at this failure, especially because it cost him a crap ton of money, threatening his nephew to earn it back.
Otherwise, you're gonna become a very distant relative.
But I'll still get invited to the family reunions, right? The next day at the library, Barbara discusses with a friend of hers there how she's been helping the police set up closed-circuit TV cameras all over the city. And apparently they're pretty advanced with image enhancement and stuff, since Barbara spots the nephew in a car on one that she zooms in on. She goes out to deal with them as he breaks into his Uncle Mobster's storehouse. This is a man who makes good decisions, as he elects to flirt with Batgirl when she shows up. Somehow, this random smug douchebag is able to keep up with her and then knocks her out with some spray. He continues to be creepy as she locks herself in a vault to protect herself, and he gets away. Later, Batman brings her coffee.
The best part of waking up is Batman in your cup.
Okay, I've had enough of creepy weirdos today.
Don't worry, you'll feel a lot better once you drink the bat beans.
Are you doing this deliberately?
Doing what?
She was only out for a few minutes, which probably explains why she didn't die in that vault, seeing as those are usually airtight. Though that does make me wonder how fast night falls in Gotham, since it seemed like it was still daytime, or sunset at least, a mere few minutes ago. Batman tells her the creepo was Paris Franz, and he was the guy in the file folder that Gordon gave him.
He's a nasty combination of narcissist and sociopath. He'll have you smiling right up to the moment he cuts your throat.
Smiling is the same thing as gagging, right? Because there is nothing about him charming or amusing.
I haven't had to deal with his type of crazy in a while. I don't want you to either.
Not since One-Face have I had to deal with anyone as deranged, as evil, as diabolical as What's-His-Face gangster nephew.
It takes some real balls to put in a line like that about this douchebag in a story that's supposed to be adapting one about the Joker. Anyway, Batman tells her not to engage with the dude without him being around. Naturally, she objects to this since they're not exactly full-on partners.
And that's it? You speak and the words are law?
Yes.
And as such, I now declare by law that Fridays are to be called Bat Days. Also, no parking on Sundays, which are henceforth known as Bat Day 2, or Bat Day Returns.
Barbara talks with her friend at the library, who is pretty much the stereotypical gay friend for a woman, real classy there, about relationship stuff. Namely, that she's kinda sorta dating Batman. Of course, not saying it's Batman, but the instructor at yoga class.
But there's no sex.
God, no.
Yeah, imagine how weird that would be. What with the age difference, the issue of power dynamics, and just the fact that Batman acts more like a father figure for all the adjacent Bat characters. Wouldn't that be weird, movie? Wouldn't that be weird, movie? Anyway, she says that he's being controlling, and the dude encourages her to find another yoga class. But she just gets angry about it and storms off.
And they say the gay scene is complicated.
Who says that? Who says that? Stereotypical gay friend written by, as far as I know, a straight dude? Back with Paris von Creeperton, he and his goons just finished up having sex with some prostitutes, revealing that the one Paris was with had her wear a mask to resemble Batgirl, because cheap cosplay sex makes him the kind of crazy that gives Batman pause. Oh, I'm kidding, of course. It probably wasn't cheap. Nor should it be. Support sex workers, people. Paris has managed to access his uncle's offshore accounts, which, as we soon see with these machine gun-wielding goons, is not something appreciated by him.
How do we get out?
And why are they still shooting at the empty rooms despite us clearly going deeper into the boat? I guess Paris thought that he should have a bomb on his boat just for this sort of occasion, since he sets it off while he and his friend escape with scuba gear. Then he leaves a video message for Batgirl with the cops saying he wants to give her a gift at the first place they met. And I guess the cops were happy to just be a messenger service for the known gangster.
Cute.
It's not cute. It's a trick.
I know, but it is a little flattering.
So, a fan sent me a bottle of Cardassian Canar. It's a drink from Star Trek. I'm gonna need a few more bottles of this stuff by the time we're done.
No, he doesn't know you. He's objectified you.
I am 90% certain they put the wrong word in there and he meant the guy is fetishizing her because objectifying her is a different thing altogether, and I really don't want to believe that this thing thinks that it's being frickin' feminist, especially when you need to have Batman explain to Batgirl why a slimy creeper being a slimy creeper to her is bad. Batman says she's off the case, but Barbara thinks that they can use him liking her to their advantage. Batman, not being an idiot, says no to that idea. However, he then goes off to the warehouse himself without any further discussion because he does need to be an idiot about this and expects that that's all he needs to say. Naturally, Barbara chases after him. However, seeing another semi-truck gets her to recall that the place that the two first actually met was the truck. So she heads to the recovered semi-cab, where there's a phone wrapped in a ribbon left for her.
Is this the gift? 'Cause I thought I was a little more special.
A Galaxy Note 3? These things are like a million years old. No second date for you, mister. He says the real gift is somewhere else.
Girls like scavenger hunts, don't they?
Is this gonna take long?
Because I lost the ability to blink a few minutes ago, and I think I need to get that looked at. He directs her to his uncle's office, where the guy's been murdered. She points out he was the biggest crime boss in Gotham, but he's not worried.
I'm the next evolution, baby.
I thought my jokes were bad.
Sorry, I thought it might be a good idea to inject some more Joker in this adaptation of The Killing Joke. The boss, Carlos Francesco, yeah, Franz is not Creepo's real last name. It's easy to believe it could be, though, because, you know, Batman stories, and if your name sounds like anything, it means you're gonna become a supervillain. Although now I've instantly made a much better movie wherein this dude just became, like, an outrageous French stereotype. Just lean into the stupid at this point. He's a supervillain named Frenchman, and have him show up in like a striped shirt and a beret and a twirly mustache and speaking like, ho ho ho, baguette croissant, Batgirl. I mean, he already has the same charm level as Pepe Le Pew. Anyway, the boss's goons come in and she has to fight her way out. Though why she doesn't go for the big window behind her, I'm not sure. Oh wait, it's because we need Batman to show up and save her and berate her for this stupid plan.
I thought we were partners.
We are, but we're not equals.
Well, then you're not partners. He says her problem is she treats this like a game and hasn't gone to the edge.
The abyss. The place where you don't care anymore. Where all hope dies.
She thinks that this is about their relationship, that he's just being overly protective of her, and a fight ensues. She knocks him down, gets on top of him, and they start making out. And then have sex on the rooftop. Yup, switch into the blood wine! I quickly listed off the reasons why this is bad earlier. The age difference between the two, the power dynamics of it, Bruce's role as more of a mentor or father figure. It's just grody and icky and a bad idea. Many have pointed out that this seems to be a shipping thing for Bruce Timm, that for some bizarre reason in all of his work, he keeps pairing Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne together, no matter how little sense it makes. And yet in several animated features overseen by Bruce Timm, somehow the two end up together. I don't think he's ever given an interview or something where he's explained it. Maybe people just don't ask, but this is probably the worst example of it. See, Barbara described it to her friend as a quasi-romantic relationship, but there is nothing on Batman's side to indicate that that's how he sees it. Sure, he's being a dick and a dumbass in this, but this seems to imply by doing this with her that he's totally into it no matter how wrong it is. And then by having them just suddenly have sex after a fight implies that yes, his evaluation of her was correct, that she's just in it for the thrills, that she gets off on the violence. And what a garbage, reductive, disrespectful take on the character. This is how you improve The Killing Joke? And we're still not even at The Killing Joke, for crying out loud. Tim said in an interview that he can't remember who it was who suggested the sex scene, but that he thinks it was Brian Azzarello who came up with the initial idea, and they all agreed it was where they needed to go.
No, it wasn't! Silence!
Anyway, a few days later, Barbara is back to talking about her relationship crap with the friend, and admitting that her and the yoga instructor finally had sex.
Girl, you've been holding out. How was it?
He kept shouting, "Tell me how much you hate rock and roll," and weird as it was, it worked.
It was fantastic. Like fireworks.
Sounds like Johnny's getting laid.
No, Batman's been ghosting her since then, and the friend just says he probably needed some time to readjust and figure things out, so she should contact him again. As she walks out of a cafe, she overhears an argument between a couple, and she tosses the guy into some bushes, clearly having some issues. Although this does make me wonder, like, what exactly happened after they were done? Did they just awkwardly redress in their costumes and then walk away from each other without saying a word? Anyway, she finally calls him, and he says he's got a tip that Paris might be at the docks, so he's looking into it. Naturally driving around there in the Batmobile so as to attract as much attention as possible. She wants to know if things are gonna go back to normal afterwards, and he says they'll talk later.
It was just sex, for God's sake. It doesn't have to mean anything.
So that means we can go again?
He just says they'll talk later, and it's all presented so sad and dramatically, and I feel absolutely nothing, because aside from this just being terrible in general, we're 23 minutes into what is supposed to be an adaptation of The Killing Joke, and nothing remotely related to The Killing Joke has happened yet. Anyway, the downside of making yourself a big and obvious target like Batman did is that he made himself a big and obvious target of a bazooka. Spotting the explosion, Barbara heads there while Bruce gets to enjoy some debris in his side. Batgirl arrives to the rescue.
Alone at last.
Batman is standing like 20 feet away, dude. She beats the crap out of Paris, ranting that he ruined everything.
Must be that time of the month.
Must be that time of the every single moment you exist where you need to get punched repeatedly. Take it away, Barbara. And indeed, Barbara beats him within an inch of his life, stopping only when she notices the blood on her hand and it seeming like she was about to kill him. She's ashamed of herself, once again implying that indeed, Batman was right and she needed to stop. She gives the Batsuit and her supplies to Batman later, admitting as much.
I saw that abyss you spoke about. Very scary. I don't know how you resist it.
Well, women keep wanting to climb on top of me and light the bat signal, as it were, so that's pretty awesome.
That is such garbage, made only worse by what's coming next.
A week later, it wouldn't matter anyway. A terrible storm was moving in, and we'd all be in for it by then.
And unfortunately, it turns out I accidentally packed my raincoat in with that bag to Batman. We're not quite done with the non-Killing Joke stuff yet, but we're finally moving in to try to connect Killing Joke stuff. People refer to the stuff before the actual adaptation occurs as a prologue, but this is a frickin' half-hour long in an hour 16-minute movie. That's not a prologue, that's almost half the damn thing. Anyway, Detective Bullock and Batman are looking over a storage space that has a bunch of corpses in it.
Says these poor saps died probably 3 years ago.
Died?
Oh my god, do you not know what death is?
Yeah, he means they were murdered, but that's being needlessly pedantic.
Well, we won't know for sure if they was murdered till after the autopsies.
You never know. 4 people might have gone into a storage container, tied themselves to chairs, and then just forgot to leave. Weirder things have happened in the DCU. Batman asks him what he makes of this.
3 years ago was that dentist convention.
The one where a handful of conventioneers never returned home.
In a city as crime-riddled as Gotham, your first thought was, hey, remember that dentist convention from that one time? Batman says he needs to talk to Commissioner Gordon, but he's unavailable since it's his father-daughter night. Speaking of... Thanks for those shots, movie. I wouldn't have known that she was running without that quick shot of her ass and backside, and then the gaping void of her mouth coming closer to the camera. And by the way, that is objectifying her. Gordon calls Barbara to let her know that he has to postpone them getting together. He has to do a favor for Batman. And it is here, 31 minutes in, where we finally reach The Killing Joke, and where I can talk about The Killing Joke a bit. The Killing Joke was not the brainchild of Alan Moore, but the book's artist, Brian Bolland, who had just seen the movie The Man Who Laughs, the Conrad Veidt film that served as the visual inspiration for the Joker. Bolland wanted to create a plausible backstory for the villain, not necessarily one in canon, as the Joker himself said in the story that he sometimes remembers his past one way and then another.
If I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice, which admittedly is a bit complicated when one of the options is all of the above.
Alan Moore was already pretty much done with DC at this point after what happened with Watchmen, but agreed to finish The Killing Joke as a favor to Bolland. There's a small bit of controversy about the coloring of the book. Brian Bolland was unable to color it himself during the original run and asked John Higgins to do it, giving some very specific instructions on how he wanted it to look. However, Higgins decided on his own version of how these played out, and Bolland has been upset about it ever since. When he was given the chance to redo the colors for the deluxe edition of the story in 2008, he jumped at it, and his version of the colors has been printed ever since. And as a result, people debate about whose coloring was better. Me personally, while there are bits of the book that I can see is better in the redone coloring, it's a lot clearer, I think I prefer the originals a lot more. Stuff like the Joker appearing on the circus throne pop out a lot better. The sequence in the funhouse feels a lot more jarring and chaotic and harsh with the oranges and yellows rather than just kind of flat in the redone colors. And when you're trying to give the idea that they're pushing Commissioner Gordon to go mad, it gives the impression they're flashing those colors in his eyes to do that much more harm to his psyche. And speaking of, that's also where we get into one issue with the actual adaptation of The Killing Joke. It's not something I'll talk a lot about, especially since people like H-Bomber Guy have gone into it a lot more. But see, they really shouldn't have done an adaptation in this style. This style is closer to the DC animated universe, but obviously that has changed as DC has released a bunch of direct-to-video movies. And while they're clearly using the original comic as storyboards to determine what shots to use for things like Batman walking into Arkham Asylum, the colors and design feel flatter, less interesting, and too simple. Where are the heavy shadows on Batman as he approaches? Where are the droplets of rain in the puddles to indicate the storm that Barbara just made a big deal about a few minutes ago? Sure, it's translating The Killing Joke on screen, but it doesn't look nearly as good as in either version of the coloring. But yeah, let's talk about the story properly. Batman has come to Arkham to speak to the Joker, who is in his cell playing solitaire.
I've been thinking lately about you. You and me.
I had sex with Batgirl on a rooftop the other night and started thinking about you. It's not weird, is it?
He talks about how, sooner or later, they're gonna kill each other.
Perhaps you'll kill me. Perhaps I'll kill you. Perhaps sooner. Perhaps later.
This is not really working. It's subjective, of course, but this is not sounding right to me. We'll talk about this more a little later. When the Joker ignores what he's saying, he says he wants to make a genuine effort to try to avert their eventual murder of one or the other, but he very quickly realizes that this is not the Joker. It's just some inmate wearing makeup.
Where is he? Where is he?
Actually, both of them got it wrong. According to the comic, it's more like Tony the Tiger. Where is he? Meanwhile, the Joker is buying an abandoned amusement park from some realtor, and this is definitely a case where there's a problem with this and the original. They try to cover it up in the adaptation by mentioning that the Joker is supposed to have been in prison for 2 years, so maybe his face isn't as recognized in this universe. But in the comic, this dude doesn't know the friggin' Joker. And even if they don't recognize him personally, they don't find it really, really weird that this guy shows up with bleached white skin and green hair to close this business deal? Not bizarre to them at all, huh?
Sure, your price is steep, but as I look around, all I can see is that I'll be making a killing.
A killing joke, that is! Eh? And thus we transition into another reason why making half of this damn thing a completely other story with Barbara Gordon narration at the beginning and end of it really doesn't work. Flashbacks to the Joker's possible origin story. Because if Barbara is the narrator, her lines indicating that she's talking after these events, then that brings up a big question.
How did you know about the parts you weren't there for?
I'll keep these flashbacks short because there's not much to talk about, other than this really showing the limitations of this animation. The Joker, he's never given a name in these flashbacks, so we'll just go with that, explains to his pregnant wife how he failed to get a comedy gig and overreacts a little to her, admitting that he's just terrified of not being able to provide for her and their baby. In the comic, he's walking around, doing stage business. His emotions and expressions are big, and you can really feel the overreaction and hurt and pain he's going through. It's a great example of sequential art and Brian Bolland's own talent for it. In the movie, he stays still most of the time. While he has some emotional moments, it isn't played up like it should. It's all so stiff. Mark Hamill is trying, but he keeps slipping into his regular Joker voice when he shouldn't, and he's not going for any big outbursts. Jeannie, his wife, is pretty flat too. In the comic, she has this amusing response that, job or no job, he's good in the sack and he knows how to make her laugh. It's the kind of thing a couple would say to each other to give them a smile and whatnot. But the flat delivery of the lines in this just doesn't have the emotion it's going for. See, that's the thing. Even if we pretended that the stupid opening of this movie didn't happen, the actual Killing Joke adaptation isn't that good either. Minor thing that bugs me. For some reason, they changed the shot in the comic of him reaching out towards a weird clown mannequin thing into him reaching out towards a fortune teller mannequin. It's not a terrible change, probably visually meant to imply knowing how to make me laugh is a portent for his future, but I'm pretty sure in the original comic it's meant to evoke the Joker's position later on that life is a nihilistic, meaningless joke. Like I said, not a big deal, but I'm not fond of it. Anyway, the Joker kills the realtor, explaining that he actually purchased the place an hour ago, and this was just him dicking with the guy. Also, the absolute worst adaptation change, no photograph of the Silver Age Batman family. Do you know how long it took to keep Batmite in place to get that shot? And you left it out? 0 out of 10, filmmakers. Actually, a cute thing they do put in as Batman looks over the Batcomputers' records on the Joker is various references to Joker stories throughout the year. Although that does make me wonder where he got this photo of Jason Todd being killed by him, or did Batman snap that photo of him right after finding him?
Jason, you're alive! Let's get a selfie!
Hey, the laughing fish! You know, you could have just adapted that story again and linked it to the Killing Joke or something. Have Barbara and Commissioner Gordon play a part in that, which helps inspire the Joker's motivations here. Anyway, Batman admits to Alfred his frustration over how he can't predict the Joker, that he doesn't understand him any more than the Joker understands Batman.
How can two people hate so much without knowing each other?
I don't know, you ever encounter internet trolls? Turns out it's really easy to be a dick to someone you don't know. And thus we get to the scene. Barbara and Commissioner Gordon are talking in their home when there's a knock on the door. Barbara answers, and the Joker is waiting there, shooting her in the stomach and blasting her back so that she hits and smashes the coffee table. The Joker's goons beat up Commissioner Gordon and drag him away. He starts unbuttoning her blouse as we move into another flashback. As far as we know, the Joker didn't rape her in this or the original comic, but of course, just stripping her naked is a form of sexual assault in itself, so it's still a violation. And of course, really not necessary, especially when we've already got the problem of essentially fridging Barbara coming from this story. And yes, this is one of the most quintessential examples of women in refrigerators if ever there was one, and the first half of the movie only made it worse. Recall, this is happening to Barbara not for the sake of her own story, but for Batman's and her dad's. Aside from one scene later in the hospital, she is gone from the original story. This has nothing to do with her. Alan Moore asked for permission to do this to Barbara, have her lose the use of her legs, and Len Wein, the editor on the story, infamously responded, according to Moore anyway, these words. Jesus Christ. Oh, but she became Oracle afterwards because of this. Yeah, but that wasn't Moore's plan. That wasn't Len Wein's. It wasn't Brian Bolland's. You know what their plan was for Barbara?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
The creators did not care about Barbara's story or where it went next. It was only thanks to Kim Yale and John Ostrander being so disgusted by this move that she became Oracle. They had nothing to do with this book or the decision to do it to her. And what does this movie do to try to rectify this decision? Show her that she was an out-of-control moron who was in it for the wrong reasons and couldn't handle Batman ghosting her after they banged on a rooftop. Barbara's entire life and trajectory as a character were altered in a story that doesn't actually have anything to do with her. And it still doesn't in this adaptation. We just see more of her. This not only fails to honor her, do her justice, and correct the mistake of the original story, but suggests that she shouldn't have even been a superhero at all! Not that Brian Azzarello agreed with that. He infamously yelled at a reporter and called him a pussy when he objected to this stuff. The reporter, Jeremy Conrad, asked at a convention why the added story seemed to still focus on the men in her life. Azzarello responded, she's stronger than the men in her life in this story. She controls the men in her life in this story. One, that is still focusing on the men in her life, and two, no she doesn't! When Conrad was walking away, he yelled out in response, using sex, and thus leading to Azzarello's insulting and, of course, gendered and sexist remark, which kind of says it all. And unfortunately, while I am being very critical of Azzarello here, this is, of course, one of those times I must remind you, do not send insults back at him. Do not direct him towards this review. Do not engage with creators while being a toxic asshole. This is just a bad movie, and this being a bad movie is not justification to be horrible. I am criticizing the work he did and the behavior he exhibited because that is my job. It is not your job to declare war on him or the like. I really hate that I have to say that, but there is always the possibility that some will take this as a reason to go on the attack on him, on Bruce Timm, on anyone involved in this, and if you would actually do that, go watch someone else. I don't want you here. I know that most of you would never do it, but there's probably someone out there who would. Azzarello wrote a bad story. He's written quite a few bad stories, in my opinion, but that's true of every creator. Oh my god, this thing has spent so little time on the Killing Joke that even I'm barely talking about it at this point. Back to the movie! Another flashback to Joker's past. Desperate for money, he joins up with a criminal gang that plans to break into a chemical plant he used to work at, and consequently the playing card company next door to it. And unfortunately, this is another case where things don't quite work. The Joker is supposed to be half drunk and rambling his explanation about why he's doing this, basically trying to justify it to himself, but he doesn't sound drunk and he seems to be speaking naturally, not nervous or anything.
Sorry. I usually don't drink at lunchtime.
Breakfast booze for me! It's the most important meal of the day, after all!
To keep his anonymity, he'll be wearing the Red Hood outfit, a callback to the original origin story of the Joker in the Golden Age. Long story short, while we never saw who he was under the mask, in the original story, he was just a criminal known as the Red Hood who wore a giant novelty pill on his head. Because big metal cylinder thing is the same as a hood, I guess. Before accidentally falling into a vat of chemicals due to Batman's intervention and becoming the Joker. In this case, the gang explains that it doesn't matter who's under the hood. Different people wear it to protect their anonymity. The flashback ends and Barbara's in the hospital, found by a friend of hers. Alone with Batman, she tells him how the Joker plans to do something to her father and that he wanted to prove a point. And yet again, the animation fails us. In the comics, she went into Batman's arms in tears over all this and worry about her father. Which would actually make even more sense in this adaptation if she was his lover and all. But nope, gotta keep the animation budget low. Need some time for Barbara to throw a random guy into some bushes. I don't know, maybe the idea was that since she can't use her legs anymore, she wouldn't be able to really leap up like that, but I don't buy it. Anyway, over to Commissioner Gordon. Some more of the Joker's henchmen, in this case a group of circus freaks, strip him naked and attach him to a collar, shocking him with a cattle prod all the way as they drag him to the Joker. He asks what he's doing here.
You're doing what any sane man in your appalling circumstances would do. You're going mad.
Actually, this kind of reminds me of my college days, so it's a bit nostalgic.
I find the past such a worrying, anxious place. Yes, memories so treacherous.
Okay, we need to talk about this finally, and I know I'm gonna get pushback on this because it's one of the reasons why people were so excited about this adaptation. But Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are totally wrong for this adaptation and should not have been cast in it. There, I said it! I have lost all credibility as a critic. Anyone who's still here, let me try to explain myself. Yes, I think that they are the best Batman and Joker, respectively. Their iterations from the Batman animated series are, hands down, the best versions of Batman and the Joker. The problem is that these lines weren't written for the best Batman and Joker. They were written for a comic version of these characters from the 80s. Batman the animated series and the Timmverse in general were not successful just on the backs of the voice actors. The writing, the directing, the artistic style, etc., etc. They delivered a good product by all working together to create something phenomenal. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill in this are reciting lines written for an 80s comic with an entirely different aesthetic, with different versions of the characters than they would normally play, and it just feels so lifeless because their performances do not sound like they're doing these lines proper justice in their inflections and tone. Hell, let me give a better example of this. In Batman the Animated Series, there's an anthology episode called Tales of the Dark Knight, which featured a brief adaptation of a scene from The Dark Knight Returns. It features dialogue right out of the comic, and it's pretty damn faithful and interesting despite having to be put into a children's show. But the thing is, Kevin Conroy isn't voicing this Batman in the segment. And why would he? This isn't his Batman. It doesn't work with his Batman. They got Michael Ironside to voice him because Michael Ironside's got a voice that works with that version of the character, having also voiced Darkseid in the Timverse.
This isn't a trash heap. It's an operating table. And I'm a surgeon.
He sells it because he's Michael goddamn Ironside, and he plays that kind of character and is perfect for that kind of Batman. Kevin Conroy is not the Killing Joke Batman, nor is Mark Hamill the Killing Joke Joker. Now, the problem could just be bad direction for these two as well, because we know they're phenomenal actors and have done a million things outside of their iconic roles. It's possible they could have delivered a proper performance as these versions. This scene, though, is another one that is changing something from the original comic. Its own interpretation, but I would argue that the interpretation is not as good as the comics. In this scene in the comic, we only get one good shot of the Joker's face during this confrontation. He's grinning ear to ear to indicate his mood. The rest of the shot, he's far away and his face is hidden in shadow. That one close-up of his face implies that he is grinning the whole way through, exuberant and maniacal as he makes this speech. But in the adaptation, we can see his face a lot and he's barely smiling. He's subdued, reserved, even frowning a lot. This version even cuts out him making a joke or two and laughing at it. The Joker is trying to drive Jim Gordon insane, but instead of acting manic and theatrical to screw with his senses, he's monologuing like he's giving a soliloquy. I don't know what happened here. Maybe this was how Hamill interpreted the scene. Maybe this is what the director, Sam Liu, wanted him to do, but it does not work. Some of it is fine, but they're just doing the voices they normally do for the characters, and it doesn't match the dialogue. Or they're not going for the right tone from how it was in the comic. But then again, even if these were great performances, I'd still be pretty put off by the giant CGI baby doll throne. In the comic, the dolls were regular size and looked creepy. What the hell is going on with these dolls? Some of them are as big as the Joker's entire torso. Anyway, the gist of his speech is that memories can kind of suck, but we need them for the sake of reason. But what if we denied ourselves these memories and embraced irrationality and madness instead? Or you can drink yourself to forget. That's what I do. There's a reason I was always hungover while reviewing Marvel. Another flashback, with cops coming to the Joker the day of the robbery to inform him that his wife is dead, killed in an accident while testing a baby bottle heater. And see now, this is something they could have expanded upon from the original. It wouldn't have been a good story in doing so, but there was something they could have tapped. Let's go back to the Hush review for a sec. At the end of that episode, I mentioned that the first major follow-up to Hush was a terrible storyline in the pages of Batman Gotham Knights, which was more of a sequel to The Killing Joke, wherein it's revealed that the criminals the Joker was working with on this job had Jeannie murdered because he was having second thoughts about the whole thing. The Riddler just happened to witness the murder and thus had the name of the assassin. It's a blatant retcon and rather stupid, especially since it very much solidifies The Killing Joke as his backstory that he remembers in full. But it's a foundation by which you could have expanded the story a bit. Maybe the intro involves the Joker going on the hunt for his wife's killer, or he discovers that she was murdered instead of dying in an accident, and after he kills the assassin, he gets inspired to do all this to Gordon, because of course, you know, getting revenge on the assassin and whatnot doesn't make him feel any better. Batgirl and Batman are on the trail. Maybe the Joker discovers Barbara's identity, and that inspires him to do everything. I don't know. I don't think it's a great idea, but it ties into the Killing Joke, it involves Barbara more directly with events, and you can start the flashbacks way earlier as opposed to them suddenly happening far into the movie. The Joker wants to back out since Jeannie was the whole reason he was doing this, but they make it clear he'll suffer the same fate as her if he tries to do that. And again, dull animation as the Joker just sits in sadness, whereas in the comic, his head is in his arms and he's shaking from his mental breakdown he's starting to suffer. Instead, we get, well, my wife is dead. That's a bummer. Batman goes on the hunt for the Joker in what was originally a silent montage. And instead they decide to throw in a reference to Batman Begins.
I swear to God, man, he ain't been around. Ah!
Swear to me.
And again, the line really doesn't work coming out of Kevin Conroy's Batman. As a reminder, here's how Christian Bale played it.
I swear to God. Swear to me!
Lest you think that the creators of this movie thought that the Killing Joke was too sacred to change or add anything major, let the next couple scenes relieve you of that assumption. First, they add in this scene of Joker putting on some kind of weird mock trial. Points for the visual gags of the kangaroos and the jury, anyway. About Batman and how Gordon lets him get away with stuff. Then Batman visits some prostitutes as he looks for the Joker. They say that usually when he escapes, he comes around to them, but not this time. Even putting aside the ugh of thinking about the Joker having sex at all, wasn't he supposed to have been in jail for 2 years without escape? How can it be a regular thing for him if it's been that long? Also, why are the prostitutes happy to sleep with the known murderer and psychopath who probably would murder them just because he thought it was funny? This really feels like a Brian Azzarello thing in particular, mostly because of one thing he's done. His Joker graphic novel. A lot have expressed surprise at me when I mentioned that I hate that book. And the reasoning is pretty simple. For a story that's called Joker, it does not feel like the Joker to me. It feels like some random deranged crime lord doing crime lord things. Oh sure, sometimes he'll do something very horrible, but most of the time, it just seems like a more violent mafia story, not one about the Joker. So Joker going to visit prostitutes after breaking out of jail and said prostitutes being all into him? Yeah, that feels like something straight out of that story. Anyway, this scene is entirely pointless, not helped by a line one of the prostitutes says.
So why do you think he hasn't been to visit?
I don't know. Maybe he found himself another girl.
Which just seems to be implying that they're referring to Barbara, and why would you add that? Anyway, back to the actual adaptation, and suddenly Gordon's not doing as well as he was in the made-up trial scene. This leads into the Joker song, which... well, I admit, I had never actually realized that he was singing in that scene originally. Usually they would put musical notes around the word balloons to indicate that if that was the case. So, yeah, you got me there, movie. And then you have nothing, because then I noticed the terrible repeating animation of the Dancing Freak Show. And this is actually a moment where Hamill's Joker works well. That showman over-the-top performance.
I go loony as a light bulb battered bug.
Honestly, the only thing that feels missing is his trademark laugh, which he never really does in this. He laughs a bit, but not the whole thing. Anyway, this whole thing is made worse for Gordon with the pictures Joker took of the naked Barbara, which he displays on screens all around the train. Batman is summoned by the cops, who received an invitation for Batman to come to the amusement park, so he heads out. The train ride is over and Gordon falls to the ground.
Commissioner? Hello? Anybody home?
Turns out Joker accidentally slipped in a dick pic on one of the screens. Gordon will never be the same again. He has Gordon dragged back to his cage.
Given time to reflect upon life and all its random uncontrollability.
Okay, they've been making minor dialogue changes all throughout this. Usually nothing major, just some word choices or a cut sentence, but the original line was random injustice, not random uncontrollability. Because part of Joker's message in this story is that trying to be moral in a random, meaningless world is pointless. That morality and virtues and ethics aren't real. That trying to impose any justice upon life is foolhardy. He mocks the idea of goodness because why be good and rational when the world won't meet you halfway? So uncontrollability being put in place of injustice just seems redundant? Or just a weird word to swap out to. This leads us to another flashback, which, despite a very obvious transition of the Joker in both times looking at his own reflection in the water, the animated version ignores, wherein the Joker, as the Red Hood, breaks into the chemical plant with the other two goons. Security guards soon find them and open fire, Joker unable to lead them properly with the helmet on. The goons are shot dead and he flees up some stairs. Batman arrives and tells the guards to stop shooting.
No more shooting. I'll take care of this my way.
Red Hood, let's punch each other and then have sex!
Batman tries to confront him, but Joker trips and falls into a massive chemical vat, the drain washing him out nearby. He forces the helmet off and looks at himself in the water, and thus he has become the Joker and he laughs, but I don't know, maybe it's just that Mark Hamill is getting older and can't do it as high-pitched as he used to, but you know how the Joker laugh sounds. This is gravelier and not as high, which is kind of a real shame when the panel it's trying to imitate has the laugh all around, and his maniacal laugh would match perfectly with this. In the present, Batman arrives at the carnival and we change things around a bit. In the comic, the Joker and the Freak Show mock Gordon in his cage, with the Joker rambling about the average man. Physically unremarkable, it has instead a deformed set of values. Notice the hideously bloated sense of humanity's importance, the club-footed social conscience, and the withered optimism. Also, his belly button's an outie instead of an innie, and personally I think that's weird. And then after he talks some more about how the only sane reaction to an insane world is to go mad, Batman almost hits him with the Batmobile, causing all the goons to flee. In this though, nope, we need an action scene with Batman fighting the goons before Joker just has the average man line, and we get back to the comic. Joker flees into the funhouse while Batman tends to Jim Gordon, revealing that Barbara's alive and the cops are on their way. Gordon tells him to go after the Joker and wants him brought in by the book.
You have to. We have to show him our way works.
And another more subdued line read. Gordon's supposed to be angry now. The plan to drive him mad has failed, and he wants to show the Joker how he was wrong by having him brought in clean. Instead, here he just sounds tired. And I'm sure he is, but it's not as dramatically compelling. Joker talks to Batman over a speaker where he reaches the thesis of his entire plot.
There's no difference between me and everyone else. All it takes is one bad day.
He speculates that this is why he and Batman are the same, that Batman had a bad day once too, and it changed him, drove him as crazy as the Joker, but he won't admit it.
You have to keep pretending that life makes sense, that there's some point to all this struggling.
Of course I have to! How else can I show the world that Beta is superior to VHS?
He says the same thing as what happened to him. One bad day changed him.
If I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice.
Why does this movie hate the Joker giggling or laughing at moments like these? It's in the text of the comic. He laughs after that line because it's a joke. And I know my jokes are bad. I've been making the same joke about Batman hating rock and roll for over 10 years, for crying out loud. But you'd think the Joker would at least laugh at his own jokes. The Joker, in a bit that I think is actually a bit more visually interesting for the movie, continues his rant while attacking Batman instead of just walking through the Hall of Mirrors like in the comic. And here the performance is doing a lot better, actually giving some energy to it, and his anger works really well, while the comic had him grinning for most of it originally. He wants to know why Batman won't just admit that the world is a black, awful joke. Why can't he see the world for the monstrous, demented gag that it is?
Because I've heard it before. And it wasn't funny the first time.
Now, Paul Blart Mall Cop? That's funny every time I see it.
He tells the Joker how Gordon is fine and perfectly sane, so his plan failed, that ordinary people don't always crack with one bad day.
Maybe it's just you.
What we've got to do, Joker, is show you a good day to fix you. Come on, we're at an amusement park.
The fight goes outside, and Joker says it's time to get the crap kicked out of him and brought back to Arkham. However, it's here where we come back to how the killing joke started. Batman wanting to try to stop their endless fight before one of them kills the other. And I think Kevin Conroy delivers it so flatly. I mean, it's not like Batman is really showing off a lot of emotion in the comic, but the dialogue really seemed like it was more pleading, sounding a lot more sympathetic about it. Instead, it's just, let me help you.
Let me help you.
Hamill's Joker is okay in response. There is a bit of sadness in his voice as he says it's far too late for that, but it still doesn't seem all that great. Our villain tells a joke. Two guys in a lunatic asylum escape onto the roof one night. They want to jump across to another building, but only one of them is able to do it. The other guy who made it over says, "Here, I'll shine my flashlight across it and you can walk on the beam."
But the second guy says, "What do you think I am, crazy? You just turn it off when I'm halfway across."
Yes, I understand. He has to throw a flashlight over to his friend so he doesn't do that.
Joker starts laughing, and then Batman starts laughing. I was curious how they'd handle this ending scene, and it's decent. See, there's a bit of controversy and debate about this scene, too. Some interpret the final panels as Batman killing the Joker during this laughing, or even them killing each other. It's left ambiguous, though in all honesty, it has to be that they just get taken away. Aside from just the way the panels appear, I mean, does it look like Batman's hands are on his throat? It would completely undermine the point of the story that the Joker is wrong if Batman killed him. This was a bad day for Batman, and it didn't drive him over the edge, do the thing that he fears himself doing any more than it drove Commissioner Gordon mad. The way the laughing is done is good, but the shot in the movie is visually bad. They took out the ambiguity by having it not be in silhouette, his hands just go on the Joker's chest, and the pan down to the water is a generic weird CGI water texture that doesn't even reflect anything, nor do we see the rain droplets, which bookended the story. And yeah, this looks like trash. Oh, and there's a mid-credit scene where we see Barbara rolling into a secret room in her apartment where she starts working as Oracle. Whoop-de-doo, it's been like a half hour since we last saw her. This totally makes up for the other crap. I think I have made clear by now my opinion. This movie sucks. This is a soulless film. There are a few things they do well, but only a few. Most of the changes are downright bad, the performances are not as good as they should be, the animation feels cheaper than it should be, and a massive chunk of it is not just filler, but character assassination. It does not correct the problems of the original story, opting instead to exacerbate those issues. We can't claim a desire of purity for the source material as the reason for that either, because they did end up changing several things within the Killing Joke segment of the movie, adding in padding, cutting several lines, and just in general being willing to make changes aplenty to that material. I live tweeted a lot of me watching this, and many people threw out perfectly logical ideas for how they could have adapted this properly, what changes they could have made to the prologue to make it connect better to the narrative. And yet, nobody was willing to go to the suggestion that I have about how to correct the situation with Barbara. Don't have her be paralyzed at all. She is shot, she recovers, she joins Batman on the hunt for her father. You add in her own rage, make it another bad day that she chooses not to break from when given the chance to kill the Joker. He flees from her into the funhouse, she stays with her dad. Gordon does the same pleading as before to bring him in by the book, story resumes as normal. But she was just shot! It's not realistic that she could recover from that! What is realistic about any of this? It's a comic book movie about a guy who dresses up like a bat, and Batman got stabbed and shot in the prologue scene, and is fine a week later. But then she never becomes Oracle! This is a standalone film adaptation. There are no sequels to this. It is not beholden to comic continuity. Not that it was doing so anyway, because Bruce and Barbara didn't bang on a rooftop in the comics either. Simply put, there was absolutely no need whatsoever for Barbara to lose the use of her legs in The Killing Joke. It's not important to this book whatsoever. It was a bad decision that the creator of it regrets, and whatever good that came from it with Barbara as Oracle, for wheelchair user representation, for the advancement of her character, and for the overall direction of DC with Oracle in it, did not come from The Killing Joke. It came from the hard work and dedication of other creators who saw an opportunity to do something good with something bad. And this adaptation squandered that same opportunity. Did Brian Azzarello have anything to say about the additions in general, like the Barbara and Bruce sex scene or how things played out in the original? The thing about this is that it's controversial, so we added more controversy.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you forever. Fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves, you fucks.
Okay, what about Bruce Timm? What did he have to say about adding in the relationship crap in the prologue? It was really important to us to show that both of the characters make some pretty big mistakes. What the Funko Pop are you talking about? What the hell does Barbara making mistakes as a crime fighter have to do with her getting shot by the Joker in order to ruin Jim Gordon's life? The Joker doesn't know she's Batgirl. He didn't shoot her as the climactic consequence of her actions. It has nothing to do with anything. The interviewer even asked him about the strong father-daughter-ish relationship bond the two have, and, well, I mean, his parental skills aren't that great. Maybe never having had any kids of his own, he doesn't realize that if you tell a kid to not do something, they're gonna want to do it even more. Did Bruce take in Dick and Jason as adults in this continuity? I know that they exist in the movie's universe. And wait, you're even admitting that the relationship is a parental one, and you still had them bang! It's tricky because it's messy, because relationships are sometimes messy. But to me and to Alan and Brian, it was all very fascinating to us to explore that angle. Fascinating for you, perhaps, but for us, it was a terrible slog, a middle finger to Barbara Gordon, and just in general, a gross, awful version of a good story. Screw this movie! Next time, let's go back to something that'll probably be more fun, seeing how Stan Lee would have handled the Justice League.
God damn it.
Hello, my friends. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching.